Take my hat off for a second.
Okay, here we are on March 8th, 2010, Cooper Hill House. What is it, 6th and
6th and Manypenny.
Manypenny, here with Larry MacDonald and his bed and breakfast in the living room for the Bayfield Archives.
Yeah. Well, we're fortunate to be here. It isn't too often that we get to sit down with the mayor of a city that's been at the head of the helm for quite a few years now, and want to get into that aspect of your life, Larry, plus the the businesses and the many fun people and things you've done in this community. But for posterity's sake and for the future generations that get a chance to peek at this video, let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from and your parents and things like that.
Okay, well, my parents are both from northern Minnesota, from up in the Iron Range. Although my father's mother had relatives in Bayfield from the 1870s through the Depression. But I never found the place or got here until about 1970. I remember my grandmother talking about it when I was a little kid, but never made it here. I was born in 1948 in Munich, Germany. My father was in the service. He was a U.S. military doctor, medical doctor. And my parents were over there for a few years and came back about 1950, and they ended up in Minnesota, back where they came from. And I grew up there, near the Twin City area. And started sailing as a young kid on a little tiny lake in a sailing canoe of all damn things. Couldn't go anywhere in the darn thing except downwind. And that sort of got me going. I started sailing a lot in high school, raced sailboats in the Twin Cities, and did a little sailing on Lake Superior, and then found Bayfield. Found boats and sailing.
When was that, Larry?
1970 was the first time I got here. The first time I really sailed here was about 78, I believe.
Did you kind of like just stumble into Bayfield, or we know in those days you couldn't Google us in, so.
Well, I'd heard about it, from my grandmother, and heard about the relatives and such things. And I know the very first time I came here in 1970, I got to the top of Rittenhouse, looked down the hill, and saw the water in downtown, and I said, darn it, I want to move here sometime. I've said that a lot of places around the world. This is maybe the only place I ever really did move to. But it was in the back of my mind for a long time. Then started sailing later in the 70s, and started teaching sailing for a few summers for Sailboats Incorporated when they first got their sailing school going, and really fell in love with the town. But I think I sort of felt like this: you couldn't always live where you wanted to. You had to live where you were supposed to work and make a living and big job and all that stuff. And one day I realized that I didn't have to do that. So 1989, Julie and I decided on a whim to move to Bayfield. We bought a boat. We had it up here. My parents had actually retired up here, even though they weren't from here originally. They retired here in 1980. Built a house, nice house out on Connie's Lane on the lake. And we liked to visit them, and we bought a boat, and just all the stars lined up. And one day in April of 1989, we were at George's gas station getting ready to go home, and I said very lightheartedly to Julie, I said, why don't we just stay? And I meant it as a joke, just a smart-ass joke. And she surprised me. She says, boy, that sounds good, because her job was kind of high stress at that time. And at that point, Phil Peterson, who used to own this house, owned Cooper Hill House, was walking by, and I used to teach sailing with Phil, and I rolled down my car window and I said, Phil, is your house still for sale? He said, yep, you want to buy it? I said, yeah. So we came back up a week later, talked to him, came up a week later after that, made him an offer, and 3 or 4 weeks later, we were living here.
So you arrived in Bayfield in the spring, and then by August you're settled in?
By June.
By June?
June 17th.
Okay, so now you and your dear wife are here, and you got this new home to move into and stuff. What were you doing? Were you teaching sailing at that time? And
no, I was done teaching sailing by then. At that point, I had a manufacturer's rep agency in the wholesale gift business. I had an office in the cities. And Julie was a travel agent for a big, very big, successful travel agency, very high pressure kind of stuff on her job and for her. So it didn't matter where I lived. Actually, matter of fact, the companies that I represented as an independent sales rep never even knew I moved to Bayfield. Just with an 800 number and a fax machine, I was able to live here, do my work, and they all thought I was, because my territory was Minnesota mostly. But it worked out fine for a while. And we bought this home, Cooper Hill House, as a B&B. Phil and Sherry Peterson, along with Rick Thompson, had bought the old house, renovated it. They ran it as a B&B for a year. Then I think Phil and Sherry bought Rick out, and they ran it. And then they had a baby. I think they discovered infancy and innkeeping were not a good mix at all. And, I'm sure of that myself. So we ended up here, I think it was June 17th, 1989, and had a real estate closing that morning. Went to post office to get a P.O. box, went to the bank to get a bank account, got up the house here about 11 o'clock, and the state health inspector was here to inspect the house because of the change of ownership. We passed the test, and 2 hours later, our first guest checked in and just scared the hell out of us because we didn't know what we were doing.
Now what?
Now what? They got to run a B&B.
Yeah, now Phil and Sherry, bless their hearts, had left everything in place, right down to the dishes and the linens upstairs, so that, because they wanted the closing to happen, but they, you never know until the final minute. So we used a lot of their equipment and furnishings and linens and things till the end of that first season. But it's now 2010. We've been running the B&B ever since, and it's just it's the ultimate recycling project. You keep an old house, an 1888 house going. It's better for the environment, better for the economy. It's good for us. We just love this whole place.
Before we started our conversation, we had kind of like a little glimpse into where the owners of this house were. So when you had an interesting comment that your family was associated with this. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Larry?
Yeah, I had relatives in Bayfield from the 1870s through about the Depression. Family story is they went broke and moved away. We're not sure if they were thrown out or moved out or whatever, but they ended up somewhere in the West Coast, supposedly made a ton of money, never sent any back.
Now, who were they, Larry?
That name was Mickelson.
And how are they related to you?
They were related on my father's mother's side, my grandmother, paternal grandmother's aunts or uncles, something like that, some relationship. And as it turned out, we didn't know until after we bought the house that they used to own the land this house was built on. They sold it somewhere in the 1880s to a guy by the name of Johnson, who built the house. He worked for Locksmith Lumberyard.
What was his first name? You remember?
I don't remember.
Was it Abe Johnson? Does that ring a bell?
I've got it in a brochure here. I can show you. And then he sold it to Locksmith a year and a half later, 1889 or so, 1890. And it stayed in that family until Phil and Sherry bought it in about 83.
Now, which locksmith would that be?
Henry Walksmith.
Henry, yeah.
Henry, yeah. Okay.
As I remember, it was Julian Walksmith and Eva lived here, and they raised, a whole slew of kids here. Mike Walksmith and Donna Walksmith, Erickson, and so they all grew up here.
Yeah, we've had a few of them over the years stop by and knock on the door and ask if they could look through the old house, and they told us the way the rooms used to be laid out and things.
Did you make some significant changes, or?
Well, Phil and Sherry did when they remodeled the home. There are 4 bedrooms upstairs now, all with private bathrooms.
Okay.
And there's we have a bedroom area, living area in the back of the home with our own bath and laundry and office and everything. It's kind of like living in a boat. There's so little room, but we.
So you have your own quarters?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Captain's quarters.
That's about it. Yes. Yeah.
The Mickelson family. That's a name that's familiar here in Bayfield, and I've seen the plot books of 1906 where Peter Mickelson owned some property out in the town of Russell. Any chance there's a tie into that family?
I think so, but I don't know for sure. My father, when he was alive, had done some looking into this, and he talked about somebody who was out in the country a ways, and I seem to think it might have been up Russell Way.
Well, it's an interesting combination because one of the Peter Mickelson's daughter that I know for a fact was Christine Erickson, who was married to Martin. And she was a Mickelson in
That is the one, because Ed Erickson and I figured out at one point that we were related.
So
Yeah, that must have been interesting.
That was.
that wasn't debatable in the
Well, once I ran against him for mayor, he sort of disowned me again. But
yeah,
Yeah.
we weren't a Mickelson anymore.
yeah, that's all right. That's Ed was the character.
Yeah. So anyway, so there is a tie-in. So yeah, so that family, there's remnants of that family still in this town.
Yeah.
However, the name is not here anymore. But
Yeah, there's a few up in the cemetery, I think.
yeah, it could be. So anyway, you come to Bayfield and you buy this place. What was the city like when you got here in 1970, and then kind of bring us to date how you've seen a few changes here, and then we'll get into your mayorship a little bit.
Well, I first drove through Bayfield for a day one time in 1970, and then started coming up here later in the 70s. And I think the biggest difference between any of those time periods, between 1970 and any year you want up till now, is every year there's a couple more houses get fixed up and painted up. There's a few more flowers. Well, I fell in love with the town the first time I saw it. I didn't see anything wrong with it, but you know, people like to fix up. It's sort of infectious. Somebody fixes up an old house, and then the neighbors do something, and then the next block tries it. That's probably one of the bigger things. We've lost some of our clothing stores as we've lost jobs over the years. That's been another thing, which is, and the drugstore, lost the drugstore. But the town it's still thriving. There's fewer of us here. You know, 100 years ago there was 2,500 folks living in Bayfield. Now we've got 627 at last count. The city clerk keeps track on her stationery every time she puts the population. So
627.
Except for this time of year.
well, that's our legal voting population in theory.
Yeah, in theory. Yeah.
I'm not sure you could find 625 warm
I don't
bodies
think so.
today.
Well, now there's a lot of second homes and that are empty all winter.
Yeah, I'd say 35 to 40% of our homes now are second homes.
You know, I'll tell you something, Larry. Larry Nurse and I are good friends, and he used to run the Standard Oil in town. He'd fuel homes in the wintertime. But, you know, back in the 70s when he did that, the same thing was going on then. About half the lights were lit in wintertime, you know, and I don't know what there is now, maybe a little bit less than half. But so that trend is kind of held somewhat steady, you know, of people being here and gone in the winter anyway.
Yeah. I think one of the bigger differences from maybe 70s, 60s or 70s till now is property values have risen dramatically compared to the surrounding area. City and town of Bayfield have really got some good property values, which is good if you're selling, but not so good if you're trying to have a young family and stay in town.
Yeah, you get discouraged, you know, with you have to have a pretty nice income to be able to live here in town, and you know, it's just gone from, I remember the Nelson house up there, which I own. It started out when in 1939, John Nelson got really mad, and he went down to City Hall, and in that winter he varnished the wood floors in there, and the assessor come by, and his taxes went from $39 to $69 in 1939. And he went down to the assessor's office and he told me, so they'll never varnish those floors again. So,
well, don't tell the assessor we're going to revarnish the floor in our kitchen in about 3 weeks.
It almost double your taxes if you do that, Larry. So
Yeah.
that'd be a warning to you.
That would be a shock, I guess.
But, you know, it's a nice community. It's got I know one of the things you've done during your mayorship has been a lot of infrastructure type of things that to me had been neglected over a period of time. And, you know, I mean, your rates are going to raise, the values of property raise when you do those things. And, I mean, a town that was built in 1856 and had water, had wood pipes in the ground for water, you know, things need to be replaced. And you guys have done a marvelous job of keeping up with it at, I think, pretty much no cost to the community, or fairly even anyway.
Well, we've done a lot. There's still more to do, but we've done, in the last several years, we've probably done about $6 million worth of work.
And where's all that money come from?
Well, we've
Larry?
gotten pretty good
Yeah.
at finding money. We've gotten, not that it'll necessarily happen in the future, but we have all of $60,000 into that. We have 1% into it this time.
Yeah.
That's
There's a lot of federal money.
A lot of Fed money, some state money, a lot of help from our political friends in the U.S. Senate and Congress, Congressman Obie, Governor's Office, Wisconsin DNR, you name it, they've all helped. And one thing we've done particularly well, it's been about 5 years now, 5 years I guess, we built a new wastewater treatment plant out south of town. $9 million worth, which is a lot for a city and a town area like this, but it's absolutely the state of the art, virtually a zero discharge. In theory, the water might be drinkable as it comes out the end. I've not been able to do that yet.
You're not gonna give it the taste test?
Well, although somehow several years ago, public radio got the story that I had,
Oh,
and I never called to change their their story. So if they see this, they'll know they were had. But we didn't make it up. Somebody told them that. But that's that's a major thing for an area like this to put in that big of a plant. And we have higher rates now because of it, our sewer rates. But Lake Superior is what makes us go. You've got to have a clean lake.
well, like my Uncle Fred said, if you wanna dance, you gotta pay the fiddler.
Well, your
And
Uncle Fred is a smart guy then.
I mean, it's as simple as that. When you got $9 million in investments, things, I mean, you're bringing it up to another standard.
Yeah.
And you gotta pay for that stuff, and it just makes common sense that, the rates go up too, so. I think you've done a nice job holding the line as well as you can. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
What really turned out nice too was the Wilson Avenue section down there where you did the water work and the force mains and water mains, and turned out really well. Tell us a little bit about that project. And
Well, all of the streets in Bayfield are categorized as to the condition they're in, and Wilson was always at the top of the list, being the worst in town. And took us a while to get to it, but it was probably bumpier than a wagon trail road beforehand. And now it's really quite nice. We were able to rebuild water and sewer down there, put in curb and gutter and blacktop, and it looks and functions very well.
it's a beautiful asset to the city's waterfront down there. It looks really nice.
It should help the businesses that are down there get a little more traffic, a little more business, and helps us get good drainage and such things. So
As a caveat to this conversation, my father remembers that when it was nothing but hemlock bark on Wilson Avenue as a kid. So it's come a long way since those days.
it has come a long way, but you dig not too far down and you're going to find hemlock bark. We did some soil borings more than one time down in that area, and it's amazing what you find. A lot of sawdust.
I was down there
Slab wood.
when they were in the corner there by the DNR building, and I saw that hole come up with some old slabs that were part of the old RD Pike and the Walksmith lumber mills.
Yeah.
Are still they were down about 5 feet, so there must be 5 feet of sand on top of them there from the floods.
Oh, that's
Pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's infrastructure work is we've done well, not counting the sewer plant, but just water, road, and sewer. We've done 5-6 million in the last few years, and we probably need to do another, I would say 8 to 10 million over the next 10 years, 15 years. And, once we get that done, water and sewer typically will last 100 years.
Yeah.
Once you get through that, then you're in pretty good shape. And I'm sure we'll find something else that doesn't work at that point.
Larry, you've always been kind of a visionary for the community, and I know we had a little talk in the past about possibly how you're looking to renovate the business area downtown, seeking some funding for that. Where are you at in that process at this point in time? I know it excited me because I can envision, hopefully I'm going to talk you into the cobblestones again or something like that. But, that whole area is just, could use a little revitalization. And what you got cooking?
Well, the state of Wisconsin, DOT, is going to redo Highway 13 coming through town, and we know it's going to happen in 1997, because that's what they told me in 1994 when I took office. It would be done by 97. And so I've given up holding my breath, but somewhere in the next few years, they are going to redo Highway 13, pull it out completely and put it back together, particularly in the downtown area. And we still have lots of old water, sewer, underground utilities there, that storm sewer that need to be fixed. So we're gonna do that, but then as we build that out and down, out, and then up, then we've got the opportunity to do a streetscape to, I mean, I would love to see the street look like that's a sort of 1930s postcard that's hanging around town, with cars and trees on the street, and cobblestone. The DOT's probably not gonna go with cobblestone, but we might be able to spruce up a couple of the side street. You know, South Second is still got bricks. Part of Broad has bricks, North Broad and part of South. But it would be nice to do light fixtures of an old Bayfield vintage or Bayfield era. And plantings. And we may get, if we get into some sort of a downtown revitalization for businesses, we might be able to help some of them get their storefronts spruced up a little bit. If they choose to bring them back to the way they used to look 100 years ago, it would even be better.
A little caveat to that is that I was reading in the Bayfield Progress that 1917 Mayor Walksmith, they did about $7,000 worth of cobblestone on the streets. That's what it cost. That was the year after my dad was born, and they cobblestone all the way to the city dock, up to I think Broad, and they were all cobblestones on both sides there, and they got all that done for $7,000. Do you think you can match that, Larry, in the long run?
Well, I'm sure we could do $7,000 worth of cobblestone. We probably could do about the size of this living room.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of an interesting thing there. That's when they really went away from the aggregate type of, you know, roadways they had in those days, and they really beefed up. The community was so proud of it. You could just see it in the minutes, you know. That
they should be. You know, that was a big step.
Yeah,
big step.
The horse and wagons were kind of out of the way, and there were a few cars in town. And now they needed to compete with Washburn and Ashland, I suppose. So.
Well, one thing that we'd like to do, or like to consider, is putting at least some of the above ground utility lines underground.
That'd be nice.
It would be very nice. Now, the main line that runs from Bayfield up to Red Cliff is more than likely going to stay above ground. That's such a vital transmission line that I don't think that Xcel Energy will want to move that underground. I mean, they've said they don't, and I can understand that. But the other ones are possible. So we did I believe it was last year, we ended up finishing up a sort of a vision for the downtown revitalization, and hired a design firm out of Madison, Van de Waal and Associates, and they came up with a lot of good ideas. They came up with a few harebrained ideas too, but you got to have those to, you know, if you don't stretch out far enough, you never get anything good.
There's no such thing as a bad idea, just when you can get working.
Well, that's true. And we will be, before too long, we're going to be looking for another grant to really help us get started and try and do some of the design work. So when the DOT starts to make noises about really coming through here, we're going to be able to tell them exactly what we want, and they'll be able to write that into their bids and their specs. Now, some of it we're going to have to pay for, and some they'll pay for, but there's a great opportunity coming up here if the Bayfield County will take advantage of it. For many years, we've been proposing that Highway 13 throughout Bayfield County be a national scenic byway. And there was a lot of enthusiasm about 10 years ago. It slowed down a bit, and now in 2010, Bayfield County is, and a lot of the townships throughout the county, along Highway 13, are taking a good look at the possibility of a national scenic byway. If that happens, means several things. One is 80% of all improvements can be funded through federal grants, which would be a big help. It also does prohibit any new billboards along, which in the city of Bayfield won't be a problem because we don't allow any off-premise signage, and haven't for, I don't know, I suppose 35 years, I'll bet. That first comp plan, I think, got rid of off-premise signage. which has been a good thing.
Mhm.
It's made people be more creative in their signs. But anyway, the downtown, it'll be fun to see it be developed in the sense that maybe developed so it looks like it used to look.
Yeah.
I don't know what
What
vintage
about
would be
trees?
good.
I mean, there used to be those big maple trees downtown.
Yeah.
Is it possible to put in smaller trees, or does the highway preclude that?
Well, we could make the street narrower, but with 2 parking lanes and 2 driving lanes, it's pretty tough. We might, we actually haven't talked about this too much at City Hall, or haven't come up with a plan anyway, but we might be able to do something in terms of trees or smaller shrubs as you go along. The way it used to look, I don't think so, because those was days of smaller cars and wider streets or narrower streets. And I'd love to see it myself.
Those trees were planted in 1872.
Is that when it was?
Yeah, that's when those big boys were planted. And I remember when Richard Erickson and Ed were cutting the one down in front of the drugstore, Myers drugstore, and then the one down in front of Morty's went, and then down in front of the Bayfield, and there were some beauties too. They were all planted, believe it or not, they had some foresight in those days, and they planted up Broad Street and in 2nd Street. They had visions in those days, and they planted those maples then.
Well, we've had for, I don't know, about 10, 12 years now, we've had actually it's a city weed inspector position, but we call it city forester.
Yeah.
Because there's an ordinance you can use for a weed inspector, but we actually have a forestry plan. We have an urban forest of city-owned, or trees on city-owned property, and we've become Tree City USA for about 6, 7 years now. We have an inventory of all our trees, and we're planting on a regular basis, so that hopefully 50 to 100 years from now, somebody will say, geez, those folks way back then, just like you're saying, planted some trees and then kept it going too. They need to be maintained and trimmed.
I remember it drove Mike Bonnie crazy in those days. Because those trees, big, and they had big, when you first planted, they're just fine. And for about 20 years, everything's beautiful, and you can tie your horses up to it or your kids up to it, whatever you want. But when they got larger, it drove them crazy because those roots were getting into the sewer and water, and they were buckling the sidewalks there too. So
we
you got
still
to be
have
a little careful with that stuff.
Yeah, we still have some of those down on South 2nd that are moving some sidewalks.
Yeah. So anyway, no, that's great. So the urban forestry concept really came into being under your leadership here in the city of Bayfield then too.
Yeah, Len Hebert was, I'm not sure when it exactly started, it might have been under Hackbarth, but I know that Hebert was active with it. He got Howard Larson going as a city forester.
Oh.
And then we've since moved on and we've expanded. We've gotten some grants from Xcel Energy to help, a few years ago, to help help trim and rid us of trees and things that were dying, or shouldn't be here. And got a nice chunk of money to put in several hundred trees over the past few years. And now we have an ongoing tree budget, maintenance and planting and maintenance. And it works great. I mean, right now there's a sign around town that says, if you want a tree in your yard or in a boulevard by your house, let us know by April 1st and we'll put you on a list and we'll see. So we've had quite a few people take advantage
Do you
of that.
get them out of the DNR then, those trees? Or?
No, we buy them on the open market.
Okay.
From nurseries. So we're not buying seedlings, we're buying trees that might be 5 to 10 feet tall at the time we get them.
Nice.
So that's a fun thing, Bayfield. One of the nice things about this town is all the trees. You got the view of the lake, you got the natural amphitheater, the hills here, you got the trees. And another thing that I think we perhaps all noticed more of over the last 20, 30, 40 years is a lot more people are planting a lot more flowers.
Tulips or daffodils.
Daffodils, yeah. That's flowers always put a smile on everybody's face, I think, wherever you go.
Kind of fun. You've seen Bayfield grow from blue collar town. The old commercial fishermen, the old canning factory people, the timber guys, the old quarrying guys. Now it's and then it had a real nice component of trades. And they used to have labor unions in Bayfield and stuff like that years ago. And they also had quite a few businesses that probably state of the art in their day. And I'm thinking right now that the community is at the upper level of kind of nice buildings along Main Street in that area, but down in the section nearest the lake now, you've seen the lumber mills gone and they're replaced a little bit. What do you think the waterfront's gonna look like in a few years down there, Larry? What's your vision for that?
Well, the waterfront is one of our greatest assets. We actually did a separate waterfront plan after we did our comp plan, and did a specific waterfront zoning area where everything gets looked at to the nth degree, so that when we start putting up things on the waterfront, that the uses are compatible and the architectural styles are compatible. So it's going to be the bulk of it is you know, the old Sawdust Flats area. It's reclaimed lake bed, so the bulk of the uses have to be completely public or marine related. That whole south side along Wilson, there can't be any new lodging facilities, gift shops, restaurants. It has to be marine related. It could be boat repair, boat storage, a marina, probably a fish tackle shop.
Slip it out barely in that.
But you couldn't have a fish restaurant. That's state statute, which is pretty difficult to overturn. It's been done in a couple communities around the state. But anyway, at this point, I think that means a lot to us that we have the waterfront. We've got a visual view of the waterfront. When we did our comp plan about 10 years ago, the thing that came in, comment after comment after comment, was people wanted to be able to see and look and be on the water.
Yeah.
And so every time everything we can do to help protect that is important. And we're lucky. We've got quite a few open spaces. As a matter of fact, the old is it Dock L, remember the Rayton Boatyard?
Oh, okay.
The one that was Helver's old dock there.
The big one there?
The earthen dock, yeah.
Okay.
The one that the city bought a few years ago. We found out it was for sale. Northland College had ended up with it in some form or fashion.
Somebody gave it to them.
Somebody gave it to them as a donation. And
The dock where he had all the old boilers and of steamboats and stuff.
Yeah,
The one that's rebuilt now.
yes, yeah. We were able to talk to Northland, talk them into a reasonable price. We were able to get a couple of grants to help, and
Boy, that's a coup d'etat.
we bought it and then fixed it up. We shored up the sides of it.
Didn't Kenny Dobson
Kenny did the work.
did the building? Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I know.
and he did a nice job. Did a great job. And now it's public park. You know, there's a picnic. There's some benches out there, a picnic table or two.
A little swimming beach between there and Badine's.
Yep, swimming beach is still there, which is grand. It's, but that's a nice little public place. Doesn't get a lot of use, but I think the people that use it get a lot out of it.
Well, my dad always said he's kind of an old liberal from way back anyway. He said he was disappointed tremendously when the condominiums went up there, because my dad always felt the whole waterfront from one end to the other should belong to the public, and it's nice to see that you guys are picking up some properties like that a little bit if you get it.
Yeah.
You always get his support on that anyway.
Well, that's important, and we felt we had the community support on that particular project, and it took a while to do, but it's such a sweet little place now. It's just
Well, you
so
get a
nice.
little nervous about it too, if you take that off the tax base. I don't know if it was on the tax base with Northland or not. There's only so much you can do, and I mean.
Well, you've got to have a certain amount of public access, public land, public parks, and in our case, lake access, visual access to make a community. And taking that off, I think when Northland had it, it wasn't even on the tax roll anyway, but it had such limited uses, and it was such poor shape that had it been taxed, it would have been $50 or $100. So
Yeah.
I'll donate that if I have to, to keep that thing alive.
Yeah.
But it's important to have. We've got a sort of a semi-working waterfront. We've got a trek and trail on one end, running kayaks. Who the hell ever thought kayaks would be out in Fossil Islands? When I first heard about that, I thought they're certifiably nuts. They've since proven that although they might be, they're doing it safely.
Yeah.
And a lot of people enjoy it. People come from all over the world to go kayaking here. We got the,
You're talking about there on the old Cooperage.
yeah, the old Cooperage building, yep, on Washington Beach, the old swimming beach.
You guys own all the way along, I know that it probably ends by the sluiceway there someplace.
We own from just north of the east-west property line on the very north side of the Cooperage. We own north of that, past the sluiceway,
Past,
quite a bit. Then the state's got that steep hillside there.
state does.
Yeah. So we actually have an old alleyway that runs right on the east side of the Cooperage that goes right up to the city property.
All right.
And we've actually, a few years ago, Truck and Trail needed some more space down there. So we have a year-to-year or perhaps a 2-year lease at a time where they use some of that property on a non-exclusive basis. The public can go in there. We don't allow other kayak outfitters to use the same space they are. But if you and I want to go there, we can go sit on the beach or whatever. Then we got the ferry boat landing. That's working. And then we got Struck's, the Apostle Island Cruise Service, Dave Struck's operation. Got ferry boat cruise boats. Then we got City Dock with a little bit of ferry action. And
You guys did some nice work on that the last few years too. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we did. The City Dock's been there in one form or fashion for 1856, I guess. And I believe it was the Fitzgerald storm in 1975 that blew that dock out, and it was rebuilt at that point with a break wall all the way around the outside, the lake side of it. And after about 30 years, it started to, not the break wall, but the dock itself started to deteriorate, and the log cribs were starting to fail a bit. And I'm not quite sure why, but it happened. So we spent 6 years looking for funding for that, and we were able to, it was about $1.6 million to put it together, and I think we got about $1,450,000 or $1,400,000 in funding for it. Finally finished it up in 2008, I believe, and it's just glorious.
Yeah.
It's like it's always been a great place for visitors and even locals to go promenade on a nice summer afternoon or evening, but there's even more people now. It's so inviting. It just walks you down.
Yeah, being right at the base of Main Street. You can,
Yep, it's just
that's
just
what you see when
pulls
you turn
Yep.
on 13 and look straight down. What do you see? Right down to the dock. Yeah.
One of the best stories I've ever come across with looking at the dock and looking down Highway 13 along Rittenhouse Avenue was in, must have been about 1999 or so, when the Christopher Columbus, a German cruise ship, showed up here. They showed up at the last second, basically unannounced, but they anchored out a mile or so offshore, and it was, I told everybody that we made them do it in this exact way, which wasn't exactly true, but they lined up exactly with Rittenhouse Avenue. So when you're driving down, it looked like they were out the extension of Rittenhouse. And you never heard so many car brakes screech at that point. People driving down, all of a sudden they see this giant cruise ship and they're hitting their brakes like, what the heck is that?
The Germans are here.
Well, that was the story. We knew they were coming in the sense that they were on their way to Duluth.
Yeah.
Boat full of Germans, cruising passengers. And they were going to be stopping near Raspberry Island. And I just, by chance, happened to look up and find out how deep the tenders were, what kind of draft the tenders they had were, and it was deeper than the draft available at Raspberry. I said something to somebody and it never got up the line, or if it did, they didn't pay attention. Well, they boat got there that day and they found out they couldn't drop their passengers, and they had a couple hundred people they didn't know what to do with for a day. I didn't know that. I just knew they were coming. Got a call at City Hall from a guy with speaking very good English but in a very thick German accent, and asking about if the Christopher Columbus could come visit Bayfield. And I said, of course. When would you like to come? He said, 30 minutes. I said, okay, better tell me more. And within 30 or 35 minutes, by the time they got down to Bayfield, we had our city clerk got a proclamation done and framed, and I ran over to the marina and borrowed a handheld VHS radio so we could talk to them. And I went home, got my tuxedo and top hat on,
Oh boy.
and we were there to greet them. And then I know that when I spoke to the guy on the phone, I said, I'd like to go visit the boat. Well, he said, we can't because of security. And I said, well, no, I was born in Munich, Germany. I laid off a couple lines of German on it. He said, well, you'll have to talk to the security man or the captain. But they let us aboard. Mm-hmm. We had a heck of a time. And I don't speak much German. I understand a little bit. But I heard the captain announcing to all the passengers that the Burgermeister of Bayfield was aboard, wearing a tuxedo and top hat. I think we had our picture taken with everybody on that boat.
Everybody on the boat wanted to be near you.
Yeah, and then they all went into town, and we sat there with the captain, and we had the nice German food and German beer and wine and all kinds of good things.
What year was that?
I believe that was 1999,
Uh-huh.
because their schedule runs about 2 years ahead before they, about 2 years out. And then after that very successful day they had here, they planned to come in 2001. And they were supposed to be here. And then it was 2001 when the World Trade Center went down, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The boat was in Chicago. Passengers were leaving and passengers were coming in, and in 2001 hit, and all the flights stopped and everything. The boat stopped, nothing. So they didn't make it. So it was 1999.
Yeah.
But anyway, the visual, it was a picture perfect Chamber of Commerce day. We got to give the chamber credit for that.
For arranging.
Blue sky and about a 1 foot chop, and I mean, you name it. They couldn't have done better. And the Germans themselves, they walked all over town. They just loved it. It was a highlight of their trip.
Yeah, it's a beautiful little community.
Yeah.
It could remind them of Frankfurt maybe a little bit, at least a corner of it anyway.
Yeah.
The Baltic Sea. Great.
Larry, when did you first start dressing up with your tux and top hat as the mayor?
Well, I got elected mayor in 1994.
Who'd you run against?
Ed Erickson.
Yeah, Ed, of course. Yeah.
And Jim Frostman actually was involved. He was a city councilman. I believe he also ran for mayor that year, so we had a primary. Mm-hmm. And Ed and I got through the primary. And I did win. Didn't make Ed very happy, unfortunately.
Because he'd been mayor for...
He'd been mayor, I think,
Quite a few.
7 terms over 2 or 3 different time periods, something like
Yeah.
that. He and Breb Walksmouth used to trade off.
Yeah.
One would run and get in, then the other one would run and get in.
Yeah.
Those were tough periods in time politically, at least amongst those two anyway, remember that?
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Well, I know he was crushed when you beat him.
Well, I'm sure he was, and that's an unfortunate part of it. But
Do you remember the ad in the paper that he had? To all of those of you who voted for me, thank you. To those of you who didn't, good luck.
Is that what it said?
Yeah, remember that, Larry?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had also said there was the League of Women Voters had a candidates forum for us. It was up to the Park Service, and League of Women Voters does a beautiful job. I mean, they run it very, nonpartisan. Nobody gets an advantage. Ed, again, bless his heart, was asked why he should be mayor. And I got asked the same question eventually too. And Ed said, well, in 1942 during the flood, I did some work I didn't get paid for, so you owe it to me. And I've got a scholarship fund, and if you don't elect me mayor, I'll never have another kid from Bayfield getting a scholarship.
Oh, boy. That's it. That's
It
it.
was the old school. You gotta love him. He's the old school. Anyway, I got elected in '94, and one of the things that we had talked about during the election I had talked about with some folks in town, is we had a need for more community space. And we started looking at the Bayfield Lakeside Pavilion, the old roller rink, which was the coldest place in town even in the middle of summer, because it's built all over the lake. No insulation, no windows, just flap doors. And I guess, somewhat naively believed that we made an estimate. It was going to take us 6 months and $50,000. I promised the community we were not going to have any local tax dollars involved, which was not a campaign promise. This came out after the fact. And we did a fundraiser. The old Rittenhouse Inn was very gracious, let us use the Chateau Petain. We had a fundraiser, and someone remembered I had a tuxedo from the Blue Moon Ball. And said, you're mayor, why don't you wear it? You're trying to drum up this money. So I wore it. And the fundraiser was a tremendous success. And I don't remember there were a lot of people that helped. I remember Lois Albrecht was there and Susan Larson, and they did all the work. But the fundraiser was a success, and somebody put that together, that there was this guy, new mayor, wearing a tuxedo, and the fundraiser worked. So then a few months later, somebody else did a different fundraiser. So why don't you wear it? So I brought it out again. That happened more and more, and it worked. It started to become a sort of an icon. And somewhere along the way, I bought a top hat. I bought a cheap one. And then somewhere along the way, I bought that big tall top hat I have now, which actually cost more than the tuxedo. But I know that when I ran for mayor in 2006, trying to figure out exactly what kind of ads to run and such things, and I finally decided on, with the help of Roz Nelson, on local graphic designer, it's just a caricature of a top hat, and it said "Vote April 4th." And some folks told me, well, those people in Ashland and Washburn aren't going to know what I said, I don't care about them.
Yeah.
The people in Bayfield will know. So although there was no plan for a tuxedo or a top hat in my lifestyle, it certainly has become.
Now it's expected.
It's expected. I only wear it on demand. I never go to a function without somebody asking me to wear it.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to, sometimes it's kind of dramatic, and so sometimes you can upstage what's going on. I don't.
Well, if they don't want, if they don't ask you to work, you just take them by surprise and say, when you get there.
Yeah.
Larry, I know you're mayor now. Go back and recount, because the terms are 2 years, right?
The terms are 2
So
years.
94. So just go through the elections.
Okay, well, in 94, I ran against Ed Erickson, and I won. In 96, I don't know if that's when Brubb and I ran against, I'm not sure.
Could have been.
Anyway, I ran 5 times consecutively.
And won every time.
I won every time by substantial margins, 60 to 70% of the vote.
Yeah.
Because it was Bayfield, you didn't have to spend a lot of money. In those 5 elections, I spent 3 times I had opponents and 2 times I didn't. But I spent a grand total of less than $500 on all of the elections. And after 5 terms, after 10 years, I was tired. I really felt tired, and decided I wanted to try some other things. So I intentionally did not run. Which I did find out within about 6 months that wasn't in my best interest. I sat home and got real crabby and pissy.
So who were the candidates that election?
There was Eric Anderson in 2004, the year that I retired. He had been a city councilman. He'd been relatively new to town, but he was an early retiree at a GE Medical, had a good, strong business head on him. A little bit conservative bent, but really a good guy. He decided to run, and I supported him, and he got in. I don't believe he had an opponent. At least not that I don't think he did. And anyway, I sat home and got crabby, not at him by any means, but just. Then when he decided not to run a couple of years later, then I thought, well, I'll go back in it. Larry Cicero ran against me. And
So now we're at 2006.
2006.
Yeah.
And Cicero put on a full court effort. And in that election, I spent $2,000, which was the maximum allowed. I signed a voluntary thing to not spend more than $1,000 per year in any of my elections, and accept no more than $100 from any individual. So I raised in 2005, when I decided to run, I raised $1,000 and spent it. And in 2006, between January 1st and the election, I raised another $1,000. And it did pay off. I got a very, very high percentage of the votes. So. And then I ran again in 2008 and won, no opponent. opponent, and I'm running again now in 2010 with no opponent. And contrary to what Representative Gary Sherman says, I'm not mayor for life. I see a point at some point in my life where I'll.
Well, it sounds like you got a lot of good goals ahead of you. There are a lot of good things down the future. As long as it doesn't drive you into the grave fretting at night and worrying about what's said or something like that. Sounds like you can have a lot of fun with it, and it sounds like you're enjoying the mayorship now.
Being mayor is being mayor of Bayfield is a very interesting task. You know, we are the smallest city in the state, our smallest incorporated city. There are villages and towns that are smaller than us, but the city is required to have a police department and a library, which sets us apart. It's a great place to be mayor. There's so many interesting people, even the ones that disagree with you. Generally, have got a good story to tell anyway. And we draw this nice crowd of visitors from all over the world. And of all places, we have really good access to Congressman Obie, Senators Cole and Feingold, Governor Doyle, everybody, because they all like to come here. So it's very easy.
Yeah, Tommy Thompson was up here all the time.
Oh, Tommy used to come all the time.
Yeah.
My gosh, I mean, it's always been a mecca for.
Senator Feingold is on Madeline Island sometimes.
Yeah, he comes, he spends 4th of July in Madeline, and he comes later in the summer, early fall with a bunch of his buddies, and they go golfing for a few days.
Obie's up here playing harmonica.
Congressman Obie comes.
Yeah, he gets in on that.
Yeah, he's a good harmonica player.
He
He's
is,
a damn
yeah.
good harmonica player.
Yeah, didn't he play with the Capitol Steps, or what's the name of the...
He has a little band. I don't know what the name of it is. I know there's a group called Capitol Steps. I don't remember if that's his or not.
Yeah, I know I used to play with them a little bit.
Maybe that's it then.
Well, Larry, when you had the outfitter store, and we'll go into that too, but really the mayor's office was the front steps of the outfitter store, right?
Yeah,
that's where you. Where do you hold court now?
Bayfield's probably the only city I've ever seen. It is the only city I've ever seen that doesn't have an office for its mayor. So I had my outfitter shop from downtown. I bought that in '91 and had it when I got to be mayor in '94. And either right out the front step, I used to jokingly call that my office. People would come in and we'd go outside and chat. But I had a desk filled with piles of junk and paper and all that stuff, plus all my city stuff there. So I sort of did hold court. I think it's a good way to do it. Probably the best story about that was 15 years ago or so. Somebody came in and was madder than hell about some issue in the city, just wild. And it was a very busy summer day, and I had people lined up at my register, and I was the only person working. So that guy starts crabbing at me, and I said, "You get to the end of the line, wait your turn." So I took care of all the other people, and then he got there, and he calmed down by then. So it worked out really, really good. So the question is, where do I hold court now? Well, coffee shop's probably a pretty easy place. Big Water Coffee Shop generally. Police chief and I go for coffee in the afternoons. In the afternoons to the Bayfield Inn. They still serve coffee there if you want, and coffee and tea. And then just if I walk around town, I always run into somebody. It takes me an hour to get from here to there because there's always somebody who's got something on their mind, which is good.
Yeah, exactly.
Share their thoughts with you a little bit.
Well, being mayor of a small town is pretty much direct representation. I mean, you know, it's not like you can't hide.
Yeah.
You can't hide. You can't. If you do, you can't hide for very long.
Yeah.
And I think a good thing about being visible and being active and being out in the community is I probably I'm just finishing up 14 years of mayoring. I'll bet I've had less than 3 dozen phone calls at home in that time period. Because people can find me. They know where they can find me during the day.
Yeah.
And my cell phone, I put that cell phone number out. Anybody can have it. They can call me if they need.
You got a nice, transparent government down there, and
We have a great staff.
you got a wonderful staff.
A lot of other mayors are very jealous of what we have here. I go to a lot of. I'm active in the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, which is all the cities and villages in the state, and know a lot of mayors from around the state, and some of them are quite envious of the staff that we have and the lack of major problems we have. We all have issues, and there's all things that go on, but I don't want to say we're lucky, but we've got, you look at most of those folks at City Hall are born and raised in the general area.
How long has Billy Hoopman been there?
Billy has got seniority on me by 60 days.
I was wondering.
She got hired when Len Hebert was mayor, just at the end of his term in February of 2004, and I got office in April. I got in office April of 2004.
And who else is down there now?
Linda Goodlet's been there several years, quite a few years longer than Billy.
And what's her job?
She is city treasurer and harbor secretary, and actually secretary for BRB, the Recycling and Solid Waste Transfer Station out in Russell.
And what's Billy's official title?
Billy is our city clerk,
Yeah.
and she's an extremely bright young woman. She's still in her 30s.
Monk Monroe was a friend of mine in Ashland. I think you knew Monk. And Jane Smith was the city clerk there. And Monk said, he says, I'll tell you what, the mayor's office is only so good. If you don't have a good city clerk, you're dead in the water, because those people, like Billy, they know all the ordinances inside and out.
Yeah.
And
Monk was exactly right on that, because I've told a couple of governors that Billy's the real mayor of Bayfield. She's just too smart to run for office.
yeah, put her name on the ballot.
Yeah. No, she's respected by her colleagues around the state. The Clerks Association has honored her a couple times with citations of the type of work, all the good work she's done. Tommy Kovacevic, he's our public works director. He came in after Mike Bonney. I think Mike worked like 35 years for the city. Long time, did a lot of things, a lot of good things. Now Tommy's doing a lot of good things. Bud Casper's our chief of police. Roberta Menger is our librarian. Roberta's probably the only one that wasn't born and raised in the area, but she's been around the area for quite a while. It's a good staff, and they each have good employees.
I think it doesn't Dion.
Dion is from the Red Cliff area.
Sure. What's her last name? No, I know it was Berzette before.
It's Johnston.
Johnston.
Yeah. Yeah, she's another good one.
Yeah. Handles all the water bills, I said.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to handle water and sewer bills, because nobody comes to talk to you unless their bill's too high.
Yeah, that's right.
But she handles it well. She's a very even-keeled person.
Yeah, she's a great asset. And then you got a staff of Tojo Gordon and Frank Gordon, aren't they on the...
They're on Public Works, and
Yeah.
then Don Thomas is
Don
our
Thomas.
utility guy, and then Joel Weber is a city employee who was out in... The city is contracted with Greater Bayfield Wastewater Treatment Plant to provide the labor and vehicles and such things to run. So we basically run the sewer plant for the Greater Bayfield area.
And so Joel's in on that then.
He's the boss of the treatment plant. He reports to
Who's
Tommy.
that? Who's the boss?
Joel Weber. He's a
Larry's-
plant operator, I guess would be the better word. But
Let's go back to the city dock. One of the fun projects we had there, you kind of got into it a little bit, was the old roller skating rink there. I think old Frank Herrick built in about 1896, and I know that Ed started parts of it. Remember, didn't Ed shore up the floor? Was that
Ed shored up the building, yeah. He
Well,
kept
when
it.
did the city get hold of that building?
City got it in the 1930s. And it gone belly up early in the Depression. In the
We're talking about the pavilion now.
Pavilion. We're talking pavilion now.
Yeah.
Bayfield Lakeside Pavilion. City got it in the late 30s and ran it as a roller rink and summer pavilion forever. And it was sort of sagging at one point, and Ed was able to shore it up and keep it from falling apart completely, and they fixed some of the floor, and they kept it, which was great. Yeah, I mean, they really, without that, the building wouldn't have stayed, so we got to give them a lot of credit for that. And then we started getting the community together in '94 to renovate it, and our vision was to have it be a year-round community center. And 6 months, $50,000, guaranteed the community weren't going to spend a nickel on local tax dollars. Wrong. Took us 3 years and $250,000, but we kept the promise. We didn't spend any local tax dollars.
One of those things where you start renovating an older building and you take a layer off and there's
Yeah,
all that stuff.
you take a layer off and there's 2 layers to put back on and a
Yeah.
3rd layer in the side to do. And but the community got so excited, the architect that we got involved got so excited, he donated all his services, Wayne Spangler.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to get lots of volunteer labor, got lots of donations, lots of grants. It was a project. I mean, it was really a project, but it has been, it is continued to be, and it's even more of an asset now to the community. It can be used year round. It's heated. It's not terribly expensive to heat it. It costs some, but it actually pays for itself.
So,
We rent it out for anywhere from little kid birthday parties to yoga classes to fancy summer weddings. The summer wedding parties, weekends in the summer, I usually booked up 1 to 2 years in advance.
I know the all-class reunion is going to be in there a
Yeah.
little bit this summer.
That's great.
So,
A lot of
yeah.
those people have
Yeah.
very fun memories.
Blue Moon Ball was just in there.
Yeah. Blue Moon Ball, she's my wife Julie, she runs, last couple of years, she's run a scrapbooking weekend for people. Brings in, probably bringing close to 40 people this year. Stay at places in town and eat a few meals, and these ladies go nuts over scrapbooking.
Yeah, yeah.
And they love the view. They love that view out the east side of the building of the lake. We'll have the Power Squadron out of Duluth, the boating group, will come and make that their headquarters for a few days this summer, I think. Race Week uses it. Parties. It's funerals. You know, we try and when there are true, what you might call civic events, we try and charge very little or sometimes nothing for those. If there's somebody needs it for a funeral or whatever, we try and we pick up the cost of that, which is good.
We had a lot of fun working there. Do you remember when we had the old Wisconsin Conservation Club?
Well, I sure do, Bob. That was a big help. Your crew helped there for a while.
I forget it was in '94, but I remember one of the fun things at the end was the kids were so excited because the mayor of Bayfield was going to take them for that sailboat ride. Do you remember that?
I took you and them for a boat ride on my sailboat over to Madeline Island. I think we bought them lunch. And,
Yeah, they remember that forever. So
well, the work they did, the work that your crew did was key. That was one of those key pieces. We put all these pieces together.
I remember building the deck there, and Harvey Hoopman came
Yeah.
down, and it was kind of one of those situations where the whole community kind of, whenever you were asked for help, they'd respond, and Harvey came down and spent a little time showing the kids how to deck, and then the flags went in, everybody's proud of it, and it turned out very, very, very nice, so.
Yeah,
Good
it is.
learning experience for everybody.
Well, it was a good learning experience for all of us, I think. And it just goes on. You know, we put some money into it each year, but like I said, it pays for itself. And people love it. Again, some of the other mayors I know that have come up to visit her for meetings, they'll go down there and they go, "How the hell are you so lucky to have this thing?"
Well, it's kind of interesting. It almost looks like you're coming into an international city. When you come to the dock there, you see all these flags flying from quite a few countries anyway. And it kind of got that ambiance of going into Norway or something like that.
Yeah, it's that. I think that project really got the community really worked together in that one. I mean, they just came together, and people they found ways to make things happen. They found ways to raise money. I'm sure a lot of cookie jars got raided, and money came out of them.
Well, you know, when you got a small community like this, and you have some locals who've been there, and if you go to those kids who are getting pretty old now, and they used to roller skate there, and they remember Jimmy Clark, and they remember Delbert Larson, and the roller skating, that touches a lot of emotions. Yeah, and people don't realize the importance of the history of a local person in relationship to restoring the community too. So some have made some nice monies in their time, and they share it.
And I hope that some of the kids that use it now have that feeling 50 years from now. It's got to be fixed up again.
Yeah.
You just got to get roller skating there.
Well, we did at one point. We got a bunch. We did some roller skating there after we fixed it up. The Ashland Leisure Services was to knock that building down. They had somebody called me one day from down there and said, "Hey, we got 100 pair of roller skates." I said, "Well, you want them?" And I said, "Well, sure." And he said, "How much time do I have to get them?" He says, "About 2 hours." The building was coming down. They were on the 3rd floor or something like that. So I got somebody with a pickup truck and sent them down there. A lot of them were in tough shape, but we went through them, and we probably had 40, 50 pair that we used for quite a while down there.
If you're interested, I know Delbert Larson is, Sandy Pavla has told me we should interview him, John. And maybe we will, but he's still got a lot of photos and, all the kids that used to roller skate. There'd be kind of an interesting collage.
That'd be great to get some of those for
be,
BHA and to put on the wall down there too.
Yeah, I mean that old building goes, I want to say back to 1880s.
Actually, it was the 1920s it was built. That building, the ones next to it might be a different vintage, but that was built as part of the Indian pageant. People wanting to take advantage of that. I can't remember the names of the folks that did it, but somebody got some money together. Naturally, they got it started in 25 or 26, and then the Depression hit a few years later, and they bellied up immediately.
Yeah.
And the old the gazebo used to be down there because that was the ferry dock waiting area back when, because that building was actually built all over the lake, and after the floods of '42 and whatever other floods there were, all the dirt came in around it.
Talking with Jerry Phillips the other day, and he mentioned the wonderful things, that the whole community's completed. And I think it was in '84 that the community bound together and got some grants and got the old Bayfield courthouse restored. The National Park Services is in there now, and it's looking, you probably read the general management plan.
I have.
In the future, and I'm wondering, what's your thoughts on the park further developing and moving forward like that?
Well, I have read the management plan, and if it was up to me, which it's not, but I would prefer that they kept all their headquarters operations and visitor center there. They have a vision, however, that is a little bit different, where they would keep their headquarters there and move the visitor center down to the waterfront.
Keep it in the courthouse. The old courthouse?
Yeah, the old courthouse,
Yeah.
yes. And so I'm comfortable that with the Park Service staying there in one way or another. They need to stay there. Our community went, they did everything they could, and they got that building and kept it from falling down. They fixed it up, they got the grants, they did the work, they got the park in there. And it's a great relationship, the city does own that building. We're the landlord to the National Park Service, and I want to see them stay in there in one form or fashion.
At least keep their operations there and see what comes of the other, so.
Yeah. In terms of them doing other, getting a waterfront presence, they're probably only $10 or $15 million away from doing that, so I don't.
Not going to happen.
I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but if I was a betting man, I wouldn't put the whole farm on it anyway.
A little bit early. Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting perspective. One nice thing about the park being there is that it would be public property, but then again, it would be taken off the tax base if Bodine's left or something. And part of the vision was to possibly at least explore that piece of property for usage and other things too, so.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of things you got to look at with that. The park needs to, wherever they are, they need to have a presence in town, and they need to interact with the public. I hope they find what they're looking for.
Very politic of you, Larry.
Yeah, I know what I'm looking for, and that's to stay and keep everything up there.
Yeah.
But they've gone through a visionary plan.
Yeah.
visioning plan.
Well, if you get a 15-year, I mean, I don't know how many more years you'll be mayor, but you wanna make sure that they sign it, and all this stability is, make sure the mayor gets their signature that they'll stay up there another 15 years or 20 years. And then they'll opt out of that and move down, and that way you'll be probably pretty old by then.
Yeah, I'd be pretty old by then.
Forget
Well, how
what,
long of a lease do they have?
Typically, I believe the very first lease was 20, but there were 5-year opt-outs, I think, and the last lease or two have been 10. And 10 years goes by awfully quick.
Yep.
But they're planning to stay there, at least their operations headquarters, which is good. And the lease is up in another, well, about a year and a half, 2 years now. So we're just starting to make noises with them, talks with them about what do they want. Do they need new offices or carpet paint, whatever it is, layouts, because we build that into the cost of the lease.
time to renovate.
Yeah.
Maybe about that period of time.
Yeah, you get about 10 years in an office situation, you really got to redo it again.
Yeah. It's a nice building. It looks nice.
Oh, it's a grand old building. It's just,
Vintage 1884.
yeah. Yeah, those buggers from Washburn, they stole the damn
Yeah. Love
county
to-
seat from us.
Wish I could find that old cannon that used to be out in front there. You ever see that photo?
I have.
Yeah, a beautiful old cannon, but I think that, according to Elder Knight, they melted it down on.
Oh, probably. One of the wars, huh?
Yeah, it didn't mean anything to that. It was a Civil War cannon.
Well, there again, it's a good thing that building was saved.
It sure is.
That almost got torn down, right?
Yep. Yeah. Bayfield has had I think a great perspective on itself. Of course, a couple things happened. I think one is the town got so broke in the 50s and 60s it wasn't worth tearing things down.
Yeah.
And then when property values started to perk up in the 70s, maybe 80s, 90s, then, well, that first comp plan the community did 30 some years ago was amazing. I mean, little towns at the end of the road that were just barely hanging on did not do comprehensive plans at that time. And Bayfield did, and that's what saved the town.
And my dad wasn't a visionary like that, but he was a pretty good friend of Gaylord Nelson's, and they got one of the big jump starts to the area was when they got together and they got some of the initial monies for that marina down here. That's in about 62 or 63 when Dad was there. They got that rolling, and then Brub finished it off, that type of thing. But you could see the town start to move from a timber town, a herring picking town.
Yeah.
You know, a little, the old moon strolling boat type of
Sure.
area to more of a modern town. And then you throw in these comprehensive plans and the visions for Bayfield, Bill Tischler's work and the city
Yep.
moving forward. It really grew. The momentum was pretty nice for quite a few years there.
It sure was. And that comp plan, Tischler's work, everything the community did, the blueprint for Bayfield.
Blueprint, yeah. What year was that? Was it 65?
68, 67, somewhere in there,
In the
late
60s.
60s. And the comp plan came in the 70s. And that's really what, you don't know where you're going unless you've got a direction, unless you've got a vision. And something like that helped. It held the town together. It was the glue. It did an architecture review board. It did a sign ordinance.
It really got people thinking.
Yep.
It was really interesting because, as you know, in politics, 51% like an idea, and probably 49 don't. But I remember the talk around town. I was pretty young then, but they were saying, nobody from Madison's going to tell me what color to paint my house. Now that was good because it got people thinking that, you know, there's some problems that you guys got to address up there. It's not necessarily the color of your house, but the broader picture is you're kind of dying on the vine up there, folks. And this is one way to kind of turn it around a little bit, and it did. It cleaned up the downtown. It, you know, the old Allwoods building kind of went, and the cannery, and it was reasonably clean at that point in time. So.
Well, it sure it did the trick, you know. And then we found after I'd been mayor for a few years, we found there were sort of some cracks in the old comp plan. It just wasn't wasn't doing exactly what we thought it could do or should do. So we did a new one, which was a good experience. Took us a couple of years. We had 17, 18 people from the community involved. And your sister was in that.
Yeah.
I was on that.
You were on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Jane Silverstein did the work for us, the organizing of it, and it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
Is that when you put in the historic district?
Well, we revised the historic district. That actually, the first historic district was done 30-some years ago.
That far already? Jeez.
Yeah,
Seems like
it's-
yesterday.
Yeah, I mean it.
Was it as big as it is now when it first was put in?
No,
No, I don't think
but
so.
it's not terribly different. It's
Uh-huh.
we expanded it some.
That's a wonderful component to the community.
Oh yeah.
I think it really is.
Yeah.
If it,
Yeah, it's the historic district helps us keep the flavor of Bayfield. You know, it doesn't make everything doesn't have to look like Jamestown out in the East Coast. But if you're going to build something new, it's got to fit the character of the neighborhood you're in. You know, and there are some newer neighborhoods in town where basically anything goes. We probably won't have any more dome homes in town now that finally bit the dust. But I look at 6th Street here, and I look at 7th Street and 8th and 9th. There's some pretty nice blocks there with houses that have been perked up and fixed up. And
I grew up on Catholic Hill, and I can remember what a shambles that was up there. That was the poor side of town in those days. Sweet Hill, where you live over here, this is always where the blue collar workers worked, and the poor people lived up there. And those lots up on Catholic Hill have some very nice homes in them now. So
boy, they do, don't they?
yeah, there's about only 1 or 2 old of the old buildings left up on that
Yeah.
corner, and don't know how long they'll be there, but.
Speaking of hills, Cooper Hill, what's the genesis of that name?
Well, it's been called that for a long, long time. There used to be a family by the name of Cooper that lived on the hill. Evidently had a bunch of kids, and everybody used to slide on Cooper's Hill. And Sherry Peterson, who's
What street would that be?
Penny Avenue
Yeah.
would be. So Cooper Hill is probably sort of from about 7th-ish down to sort of Maggie's area.
Yeah.
But Sherry and Phil and Rick call it Cooper Hill House, just after that old nickname, community name. And our neighbor, Florence Hessing, who's well into her 90s now, when she was a young child, her family moved here and they bought a farm, but they came in the winter and they couldn't get to the farm. There was too much snow. So they were in a house somewhere on Penny Avenue on Cooper Hill, and she remembered that her mother wouldn't let her go out and slide with those hooligan kids. But she had her nose pressed against the window and watched them, all the kids slide down Cooper Hill 90 years ago.
Yeah.
I used to slide there.
Did you? You know, we try and do that once a year now with the rec center
Oh yeah.
March Madness sort of weekend, and we spend so much time taking snow off all the hills that once a year we put snow back on Penny Hill and actually let people slide for a couple blocks.
Yeah.
Well, that's where we used to start up by Mel Erickson's there. Down the hill you'd go and past Chapey's and Ben Hudak's and that type of thing. A lot of fond memories there.
I bet, yeah.
The old red flyer. Proud of that. We got to take it to church over here at the Lutheran church, and we come from the Catholic Hill, and we'd go to church and take our sleds over and meet Mom and Dad here. And we got to slide on the way home
Wow.
on Sunday. So
Sounds like a lot of fun. I think a couple other things that have been really fun and good for the city have been a couple of playgrounds that we've been able to rebuild. Including East Dock Park and Cooper Hill Park, just kitty corner here. But those were basically a community, the East Dock Park was a community design and community build project. We had parents of young families come to us and say this, you've got playgrounds, which is good, but they aren't very safe and the kids want something different. And we said, well, help us, tell us what we should have. And I'll be darned if these folks Shannon Swanstrom and a bunch of others got together, and they really dug in, and they told us what their families wanted. They had community listening sessions. We went out and hustled some dough, including got a grant from Wisconsin Coastal Management Council. That first of all, when they first saw it, said, "What the heck is this? We don't fund that. We fund coastal projects." And then finally they looked into how interpretive that was, with the ferry boat playground and the lighthouse climbing tower and all that stuff. And they gave us $40,000, $20,000, something like that, 30-40 grand towards it.
When was that park renovated?
Oh boy, that must have been about 2003, 2 or 3, somewhere in there. And I remember it very well because we hired a firm from out east to design it with community input. And they supervised construction, but it was a community build. I mean, people came and hands-on, and Mark Sherman from up in Russell, a little construction company, he brought his crew down for a couple days, and they did a lot of and donated their time. They did a lot of the more technical or heavy-duty, dangerous carpentry work. And the biggest problem we had was at the end of the first night when it opened up. There was a big picnic, and there was kids there, and they're playing, they're having a great time. And as it started to get dark, all you could hear was kids crying and screaming, "Mom, I don't want to go home." That's the best problem you could have in the world.
Yeah.
It was just fun.
Well, another nice piece of that little park, and I can't remember if it happened a little bit before then, was the city recognized the need for that fishing pier,
Fishing pier came first.
that accessibility pier.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, if you could.
Well, that,
Hang on, you guys. I'm going to change cards here.
okay.
Okay.
Well, we had had some people mention us that it might be fun to have somebody to fish a little more, because the marina wasn't too gung-ho about having kids throwing fishing lines and getting them caught in boats and boaters and such things. And there were some old cribs that were put out in that southeast corner of town. They've been there a long time, underwater. Actually, that's the Ed Erickson story. I talked to him one day. I think I was chair of the Harbor Commission at the time. It was before I was mayor. And I said, "Ed, there's those cribs there." He says, "Yep." I said, "You got to give me a price on what it would cost to top them off. Maybe we can put a fishing pier on top." Okay. I don't know, quite a bit of time went by, and all of a sudden one day I'm driving down and I see the outer island down there. I'm going, "Oh no." He went and he built the cribs and he was putting them in place. He never gave us a price. No permits.
Well, that's the way he used to do it.
Yeah, I had to have him stop. He was mad, and I could understand he's mad. And then the DNR got involved. I think that we convinced them not to ticket him or not to fine him too much. So we left him. We probably paid something towards it. And then we started working with the DNR that, we should do something with that, and they found some grant money to help us. So I don't even remember who designed the darn. Oh, we hired an engineering firm out of Ashland.
So when was that little fishing pier built then, roughly?
About 2000 maybe?
So before the park.
98? What do you think?
Yeah, it was 96, 98,
Somewhere in there, yeah.
That's the one that faces La Pointe. The handicap fishing pier?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess it'd be 90 somewhere in there. It was designed like a fortress, and
It needed to be too.
it needs to be when those waves come in, but it stood the test of time. The young crew that helped build it did a good job. And people catch some fish out there. A lot of people go sunbathing or just watch the lake or watch the boats.
Yeah, it's a beautiful spot right there.
Well, it's a nice place to stop when you're walking around the waterfront.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. It's a great place.
And it's got the slots open there, so people, if you have a disability, you're in a wheelchair, you can actually fish between those particular slots. So that was
That was a great idea.
Was that part of the deal too?
It had to be with get the DNR funding,
Yeah.
which was which is a great idea.
It's
I mean,
a great idea.
everybody should have
Something
access to it, access to the lake.
So, okay.
I want to go back to the outfitter store. 'Cause
Sure.
I haven't gotten that yet.
Okay,
Good idea.
So you came up here, you moved up here in '89, as I recall.
89.
All right. And what did you do that first year
The
then?
first 2 years we were here, we had the bed and breakfast, which we still
Yeah.
have, but I owned a manufacturer's rep company in the Twin Cities, and I kept my office there, but I put an office here and basically ran it from here. But I had to go to the cities almost every week. I made like 100 trips in 2 years. And it always seemed like the days I had to go were beautiful sunny days.
Yeah.
Perfect for sailing, perfect for skiing. And one day it just hit me. I was working in the cities and I said, I can't do this any longer. And I opened up the Sunday paper down there and there was an ad for a fish tackle store in Bayfield. Turned out it was the Apostle Islands Outfitters. So I responded to the ad and over a period of a month or two, worked with Bobby and Tony Ripple, who owned it at that point.
Okay.
And bought it from them. They had it as basically a fish tackle store. They had a little bit of clothing and a little bit of gift stuff. I had spent many years in the gift business and also many years in the ski area and golf business. Sort of thought I could put some of my retail ideas to use because I knew you couldn't make enough money off fish tackle to make a living in Bayfield. So we kept the name the Apostle Islands Outfitters, eventually added N General Store to it, and basically we carried about 4,800 different items. It was an inventory nightmare.
Oh,
But if you needed something, you could probably find it. You know, we carried some fish tackle, a little bit of camping gear, we carried knives, we carried sunglasses, we carried underwear, books. We had carried 1,000 titles of books, kids' toys, greeting cards, reader glasses. You know, people come up here and lose them or break them. And we could
sold
save
fishing
the day.
license there.
Sold fishing licenses. I was the fire warden, gave out fire permits.
Yeah. Maps.
Yeah, the UPS.
Maps, yeah, it was charts, maps, USGS maps. We did UPS, we did film we filmed delivery. We had the place in Ashland do the work.
That was like Petticoat Junction right there.
It was a little bit of everything,
Yeah.
and I did it for 17 years.
Jeez.
It didn't seem like that long, and I enjoyed it. It was a great way to make a living and met a lot of people.
And who worked for you there?
Bobby Ripple, the gal who I bought the store from, she and her husband, and she had agreed when we bought the store in '91 to come work for us for a few weeks. And 17 years later, she was still there. She loved working in it.
Yeah.
Love the people.
Yep, she just did it. She did a great job. She was as much a part of the store as Julie and I were. Another fun employee story we have is Dion Johnston at City Hall. One of her, I think it's probably her oldest daughter, Alex. At one point, 10 years ago or so, Alex must have been in middle school. Dion asked, or somehow we started talking about kids working. I said, I might have a job for a young kid. Well, I didn't really know Alex, and all of a sudden one day this kid walks up to me, this young gal, and says, my mom says I'm going to work for you. My name's Alex. When can I start? And I'm going, who are you? And all of a sudden I put it together and I thought, you know, she's got a lot of moxie. She's 14 years old, 14 years old. She showed up and she ended up working until at least her first or second year of college for me. She's become like another granddaughter of ours. We keep track of her.
Yeah.
She was a good kid, a great kid. But the Outfitters was a grand place. It was the store where you could certainly get a line of BS if you wanted. You could bring one in or get tall tales, whatever it was.
And what was it before it was an Outfitters or a fish tackle store?
It had been a plumbing supply and it had been a bowling alley before that. And that building came down and Artie Kennedy built this building. He actually had a garage in the back that was the upstairs of the Outfitters. I think he used to store his old Tornado in there or something, didn't he?
Could be. It belonged to Wally Nordine at one time. And then when Mike Wasmith bought him out, then Mike and John Morado and see them come out of there every day. I can still see the old glass plates there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Wally Nordine.
And I had a sort of out of the blue. I had a offer to sell the building in 2007, and we finally did complete the transaction in early 2008.
Mm-hmm.
We had a going out of business sale. Took a couple months to do. Most I ever worked, the hardest I ever worked in that retail business was getting rid of all that stuff.
Yeah.
We it was actually an interesting deal. You know, I was always used to buy inventory, getting more, and all of a sudden I'm trying to get rid of it. I'm trying to empty it out completely.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a 10, 20%, 30% off sale, and then we did a buy one get one free, and then we were doing buy one get two free. And we were getting rid of stuff, and we found things that we had bought years ago that got pushed in a corner in a box underneath a pile of junk. I found a couple of oars, wooden oars. They're great, but they were old as the hills. So I put on there $10 each, 2 for $9.
Oh.
We had somebody come in and argue with us. He did not want 2. He was only going to buy 1. So I sold him 1 for $10. I don't remember who it was.
All right, just be that way.
Yeah.
Now that's the core store.
It's the core store. Yeah. It's got a great new life to it, fulfilling certainly a big community need.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, Julie and I find ourselves, like yesterday we were at or Saturday we were at the Polar Plunge. And it's because we had the outfitter store and we had parking. We would just park our cars there. We went to any event in town, we would just walk. And we started walking up from the Polar Plunge and we were going to go to the outfitters to get our car. Which, it was at City Hall. But
Creatures of habit there.
yeah, it's been 2 years since we've had the place. But
Yeah, a lot of fond memories there, I bet.
yeah. I'm glad I did it. It was quite an experience.
Could the community use another nice little shop like that? Or?
I think so. I had actually, before I had the opportunity to sell the building, I had been talking to someone from out of the area who had some connections here about the possibility of buying the business and the building. Mm-hmm. And when push came to shove, it just didn't work for those people, unfortunately. They would have been very good at it because they'd been in the business before. Mm-hmm. And every day, not every day, every once in a while I get a bug in my ear and I'm thinking, it might be fun to do another one. And I think,
Still a few lures yet.
yeah, and then I think, gosh, it was 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. We were closed 3 days a year, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. So it was a lot of work.
It takes a lot of time. There's other things you'd rather do now. I know that you're a proud grandparent, that type of thing, and you're doing a little traipsing now in your spare time, or?
Yeah, we've got grandchildren, and our grandchildren are grown up enough, they're having babies, so we're great-grandparents now.
Yeah.
They all live down near the Twin City area, so we get there occasionally. I think a few of them will be up now for Easter. Yeah, our kids were quite surprised when we decided to move to Bayfield. They were all out of the house and lived within 5 miles of us. And this is in '89, and we called them all. We didn't tell them we were going to move to Bayfield. It sort of happened at the last
Guess
minute.
where we're at.
Well, so we called them all together down at our house in the cities, and I don't know what they thought. I think they thought we were going to buy them a car or give them money or something like that. But we were sort of their banker and their babysitter all the time, which, it's what parents should do for kids.
Yeah.
Call them all together, told them what we were going to do, and there was just this look of, huh? And we said, we said, everybody else's kids, some of them, or most of them, end up, they get out of school and they move on, they go somewhere. All of you stayed within 5 miles of us, so we're leaving you. Yeah, they come up and visit, which is good, and we go down and see them. But
So you're here to stay.
we're here to stay.
Yeah.
This is home for us. Someday, if we don't run the bed and breakfast anymore, we're keeping the house. We like the house a lot. It's just a very comfortable, wonderful old place.
Yeah.
A lot of class, beautiful hardwood floors, and
Yeah.
I see the railings are still the same. And
Yeah. There's that newel post in the bottom here. It's just beautiful. It's really grand.
yeah, I can remember when Julie and Eva were here. I can still
Yeah.
see them on the front steps. And those were the days when it was catechism over here. here. You know, it was being confirmed at the Lutheran Church, and Julian would be around, and Eva and the kids, and I was 13 years old, and that'd have been 62. So Julian was here, but he was invested over in losing his father's fortune over in northern Michigan, or eastern Michigan. Yeah.
Well, we like the house, we like the neighborhood, we love the town, we love the city. It's just, we've been halfway around the world and never found any place we liked as much as Bayfield.
Even like the winters, don't we?
We love the winters. You know, there's a week or two I wouldn't mind getting away, but we like 4 seasons. Bayfield, we get so much lake effect snow. It's nice, it pretties it up. It's nice to see it.
So these places, your place looks really nice at Christmas. I know you put somewhat of a pretty large emphasis on Christmas. The place looks like it's in the 1910s again when you go by here.
Yeah.
It looks nice.
It does. Yeah.
Larry, what was your sailboat, the name of your sailboat?
The L&T.
And where'd you get that boat? Tell us a little
I
bit
bought
about the sailboat.
L&T is a 38-foot CNC made in Canada. It's a 1975, and I bought it in Detroit in 1988. And I had the good fortune to sail at home. It cost the same to sail at home as it did to truck at home. And I thought I wouldn't be riding in the truck, so I'd lose all the fun. Might as well sail the darn thing. And it was a great trip. Julie was quite surprised when I pulled into Bayfield, and she said, "How you doing?" I said, "I want to buy another boat so I can sail home." She said, "No, you're not. One's plenty."
Do you still own a boat now, or?
I do own it. We haven't used it in a few years.
I thought
Both of us got sick. Julie got sick in December 2005, and I got sick in 2006. Quite ill, and we're still paying off a lot of medical bills, so we haven't been able to afford to put the boat in water.
Yeah.
We still have it.
Did you ever charter it out or not?
I did not charter.
Yeah.
We were lucky enough that we had enough money to buy the boat and pay for it, so we didn't have a mortgage on it. And we intentionally didn't charter it, so we only had to take out people we wanted to.
Yeah.
We took out a lot of folks.
You used to keep it down at the city dock there.
We did, yeah. And that was my office for the mayor for a long time also. My own personal office. I had all my books and records. And yeah, I used to pay all my bills there, and I could take a nap when I wanted. The police chief used to come down and bring me coffee. Yeah, it was it was fun. Hopefully one of these days we'll get it back in the water. I've sailed about 10,000 miles on Lake Superior.
There's another part too. Are you still involved with the Ski Hill Foundation?
I am not. I did that for a short while a year ago.
When did you do that? Tell us a little bit about that, because I know that you got involved in that.
Well, I'd spent many years, 15, 16 years, working at ski areas all the way through high school, college, and then for 8 years after school. And then hadn't done it for quite a while. And then about a year and a half ago, I saw an ad in the paper that Monash Bay was looking for an executive director. I thought it'd be a perfect mix. I applied and interviewed and met with them several times, and they thought it'd be a perfect mix. Unfortunately, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that I was there a few months and realized it just wasn't the right thing.
Yeah.
And I wish them well because I just love that place. It's a Lake Wobegon Garrison Keeler ski hill. It's a place that time forgot.
And what was the name of the group you were working with? Because I know the ski hill went through a transformation.
Oh, it was the Asher Bay Outdoor Educational Foundation. And they're still very active. They've got somebody new in there, and it looks like they're doing a good job.
And what was their mission?
Their mission initially, before they got the ski hill, was to literally provide ski racing, ski lessons to kids in the area, to anybody that was interested. And when Mary Rice wanted to sell the ski area, they were sort of like the only organized group around there they do with skiing, and they sort of perked their ears up and they sort of jumped at it and made a big leap of faith. A lot of very dedicated people, and they were able to, through a lot of hard work and connections, able to get, I think it was $900,000 through Congressman Opie, not from, but through the federal government. And the purchase price was only $600,000. So but they couldn't take that money and use it for anything else. It was designated for land purchases along that ridge. So the ski hill was purchased, went to Ashaway Outdoor Educational Foundation. The rest of the money was able to be used for additional land purchase. So that, I think, sparked the Sugar Bush purchase, which was great. And then there was that chunk of land in between. And then this, again, it's like all the stars line up. The DNR got involved, and I don't know if it's U.S. Fish and Wildlife or who it was, but everybody got involved, and then the middle piece got purchased. And now there's, I think, a grand total of 1,100 acres there. Not all under Asher Bay's auspices, but all connected, all for skiing and snowshoeing and
Outdoor
hunting,
recreation.
outdoor recreation. It's like having a brand new state park.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best.
So is some of it in a conservancy, or is it all? Or is it all under the foundation?
It's not all under the foundation.
Yeah, I
They've
think
got a
that's-
couple hundred acres of it. The county's got some that Jerry Jolly donated 40, 50, 60 acres there. DNR's got some. It's an amazing checkerboard of things that worked, and everybody's agreed to allow skiing and such things to go on there.
So it's basically in the public domain.
It's
then?
in the public domain. We're so lucky that happened. That first of all, Mary had the good graces to wait to let Asher Bay get their whole program together. That Congressman Obie was part of it and helped them get their program together. That the Asher Bay folks actually did get it together, and that sparked all this enthusiasm with everybody else.
It kind of grew.
I remember we took Governor Doyle up there one time. He was up for bringing Wisconsin government north, and it was in the summer, and we were meeting him at Wild Rice for a drink and then dinner. And before he could sit down, I grabbed him and I said, "You can't sit down." And, you didn't really tell the governor that, but and his security guys were like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "No, he's going with us, or you can go too. He can ride his own Suburban, but we're taking you to the top of Mount Asher Bay, and we're going to show you what it is we mean, because we have to get a state grant and we have to have your enthusiasm in order for it to happen." Drove up that back road all the way up there. It was, again, a beautiful, picture-perfect summer day. He looks out and he said, "All right, this is it." He said, "I understand what you're saying." You could see all the way down there Outer Island that day.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
The old vision of Harry Jardine
Yeah.
came full circle maybe or something.
Well, Asher Bay, you look at all the families and the kids that ski there and have skied there.
Generations.
Generations, it's been around 60 years.
There's a couple guys in the area that helped, like Bucky Batan work for Harry Jardine. They told Bucky, he says, "Here's you work for me for nothing," he says, "and we'll have free ski passes the rest of your life."
Probably was pretty attractive at their young age.
Yeah. I said, "Go collect, Buck."
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. That's a wonderful amenity to the area. Top of that, the Chautauqua and all the nice things.
Oh, yeah.
Big draws to the area. Those are big deals.
And Big Top needs Asher Bay, and Asher Bay needs Big Top. They thrive on each other, because Asher Bay's got the food and beverage concession, and Big Top provides the customers, and that food and beverage concession creates enough dough for them to stay open in the winter, which is a great thing. Another fun thing that happened to our community was in 1997. Chicago Tribune sent out a writer by the name of Al Solomon, and I still read Chicago Tribune every Sunday. And I remember reading about that spring, and Solomon wrote an article, and I didn't know him at the time. Said he was going to be sent on a mission to find the best little town in the Midwest, and if you wanted your community to be looked at, send him a note. So a couple months later, it was in June, I'm in my store at the Outfitter store where we did everything, and I hear a guy speaking loudly to a young fellow who worked for me. He had some film, and it absolutely had to get to Chicago the next day. We did UPS. And I'm thinking, what are the chances? So I go up and said, "Is your name Al Solomon?" He said, "Yeah, how'd you know?" I said, "Well, I just guessed it, gave him the story that I..." So we started chatting, and he made some notes, and I said a couple sort of smart-assy things, and he put them in the Chicago Tribune that Sunday. I thought, "Oh God, I'm in trouble now." But then a few weeks later, I heard the same voice in my store, shipping something else UPS. It was him and his wife. She was a baseball writer, and it was during the All-Star break, and she was covering the Cubs, and they never had anybody in the All-Star team, so she had 3 days off. So they took their own summer vacation in Bayfield. I thought that was a good sign, because he was traveling, 8,000 miles, 60 days. So we started chatting, and he said he wanted to go sailing, and I said, well, I'll take you sailing. So the next day, he and his wife and my wife and I went out, and again, it was a Chamber of Commerce picture perfect day. Southerly winds, about a 6-inch chop. And we brought sandwiches and he brought beer, and we were out there. We just had a grand time. It was just, and I remember him asking me, he said, a lot of communities invited us to come, but he said, you didn't. How come? And I looked at him and I said, I figured if you couldn't find us on your own, why would we want you to write about us?
Oh.
He started to act, joking a little huffy, and his wife slugged him and said, see? And that day when we were, he had not made his decision yet, or if he had, he wasn't going to tell us. And I said, if you would decide on Bayfield, I said, make sure you talk about us exactly the way we are. Not any made-up stories, if warts and all, whatever it is that's going on, tell people. And he did. That article that when they up selecting us, he told, he described it exactly the kind of person you'd need to be to have fun up here, and that's what it's drawing, and it's still drawing people. I saw that article 13 years ago. He came back 10 years later, came back in 2007 and did a follow-up.
Well, I remember when that first article came out, the next day there were Illinois plates in town.
Well, there were.
And even that night.
He mentioned, along with a lot of other places, he mentioned our B&B in that article with the phone number. And I could not call, I must not have had a cell phone at the time, I couldn't call Julie for about a week, because whenever she'd hang the phone up, it would ring from Chicago, and people wanting to come. They were going to come next week. And she'd go, we're already booked. I'm like, you can't be, I'm from Chicago. But what we found is with Al's writing, describing the community the way it really was, we drew the kind of person that liked it the way it is, for the most part. And that was a good thing. There were a few people that got mad at him about writing about nobody locks their doors or uses their house keys in town.
Yeah, I remember people complaining
But
about it.
the people that were the maddest about it come up to me and I said, is your front door locked? No. So your car keys in your car? Yeah. I said, well, all I did was tell the truth.
And we didn't have an uptick in crime after
We
that.
did not have an uptick in crime, and I did suggest to some of those folks that, first of all, the people in Chicago that would probably come up here and rob us probably don't read the Sunday Trib travel section. And if they did, they'd probably have to steal a car.
Yeah.
And they'd get caught before they got here, so we were in good shape.
Well, you worked pretty well hand in hand with the Chamber of Commerce and the Lake Superior magazines and stuff like that. So the city's really has a nice look to it, nationally and things like that too. So
Yeah, we present a good image. I mean, the community is well respected, well known around the country. I think a fun little story is when I first got to be mayor, I started going to Madison, and no matter where I went, they'd say, "You're who? From where?" I mean, hardly anybody. Nobody knew me for sure, and not many people knew Bayfield. 10 years later, when I was trying to retire in 2004, I was walking around the Capitol, sort of doing my goodbyes, and I walked in the Lieutenant Governor's office, Barbara Lawton's office. And as I walked in, the guy in the front part of her office looked up and smiled and said real loudly, he says, "Oh shit, here he is again." So everybody in the office could hear. Another thing that we have, I think it fits Bayfield to a T, but all the sustainability issues and the ideas of being green and stuff, that's really, a lot of that's just sort of old school stuff from Bayfield. I mean, the community was poor enough at one point, you had to do those things.
they're naturally green.
Yeah, naturally green. Well, and that's good. I always describe it as my old Finnish grandmother. All we're doing is what she used to tell us as kids. They didn't have a penny, so but we have adopted those ideas. The community is so gung-ho. know, and we're becoming recognized. We're about to be recognized by University of Wisconsin Stevens Point as a big sustainability program at the college there, the university. And they're doing a recognition of 40 communities around the world that are doing things right.
Really?
And Bayfield's, I've proofed the copy. I haven't seen it come out yet, but Bayfield's going to be one of them. And Wisconsin Trails magazine just did an article about Bayfield's Green, another one just. And, we've done a lot of good things with that.
Yeah, the whole peninsula area seems to be heading that way.
Yes.
And that's really good.
The whole Chequamegon Bay is getting a reputation. We're probably going to be doing some fun things in the next year or two or three on helping homeowners be able to make their houses more energy efficient. Got some information. We're working on some bonding programs, and we might be able to help people of not just low to moderate income, but even middle income do the right things and pay it off over a long period of time.
Good, I'll get in line on that one.
And John, it's the coolest thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to a meeting in about 5 weeks that will set the stage for that. It'll just be great.
Yeah.
And Bayfield's being picked as a recipient of this because of all the work we've done on other things. You know,
Yeah, your resume was built towards it, so
yeah,
it falls in the line.
and the community demands those things, which is the fun thing. You know, you guys have probably everybody's hopefully seen that. Living a Sensible Life in Bayfield. Well, the gals who wrote that booklet, I mean, how could you tell them no? You just couldn't.
Yeah.
You know, you look at Bev Yench and you look at Sandy Pavla and Diana Lind and whoever else was involved, all of them. They put their heart and soul into that, and they know what's good for our community.
They are professors to that.
Yeah. And that's interesting stuff. That's really good stuff. That'll keep us around for a while.
Well, you've got us to 2010, Larry, and you're going to run again, and sounds like the community is in A1 shape. Probably there are little things you're working on all the time, and you know, I want to thank you for the good job, and I just think you've done a marvelous job pulling all those strings together to tie the package. So.
Well, it takes a lot of people to make it work. I have the luxury of sort of leading the parade, but everybody else does the work.
You know, you're a good manager of people there that you get the right people in the right spots, and you can pull things together.
Well, let's just pursue that beyond in terms of looking ahead 10 or 20 years, Larry. You know, do you have a vision of what this place might be like, or hope it's like under the best of circumstances?
Well, I would say under the best of circumstances, Bayfield will follow its comprehensive plan, and it will look much like it does now. Maybe a little better, maybe a little more spruced up here and there. We don't want it to be too perfect. We need what they call a little messy vitality to it. You need a little junk in the backyard here and there. Even a little peeling paint once in a while doesn't hurt. But it can't be perfect, but I hope that we've done some work on, and we've gotten some folks who are living in the area now who are doing their jobs, they're commuting electronically. We're working on some more initiatives like that. In a perfect world, that's going to expand rapidly. We'll know in the next year or two or three, but that will help a lot, because more year-round people spending more money will help our grocery, our gas station, our restaurants, our gift shops, hardware store, you name it. I hope in 10 or 20 years I'm still here. We're probably not going to be running the B&B, but we'll talk about the days we used to run the B&B.
I remember when.
Yes, I remember when.
We'll do another interview then.
Hey,
Hopefully I'm still here.
we'll do that.
There's all three of us may be done with it.
I think we will be. I think so.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Larry.
Well, this was fun.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. This is great.
Any other last thoughts? Any other stories? You'll probably think of someone when we turn.
I'm sure as soon as you go, I'll think of some, but those are probably the ones I should say in public.
Some of them need to be in your private memoirs.
Yeah.
Well, Well, thanks,
Okay.
Larry, it was